Hi, I'm Steffany Strange. Want to hear something scary?
Pastel and Greg were a happy young couple in love. One of their passions was traveling. They loved to gaze upon the natural beauty of the world. It was how they felt closer to God. Their favorite spot to visit was Mines View Park, a cliff with a spectacular view. That's where Greg proposed to Pastel and where they held their simple wedding ceremony. Not too long after, Pastel became pregnant with their first child. Pastel and Greg, being a very good-looking couple themselves, were constantly showered with assurance from their friends and family that their baby would, too, be beautiful. In the months leading up to their baby's birth, they prepared the nursery and bought many toys and clothes. They spared no expense. They had traveled all over the world to see God's beautiful creations, but they knew nothing would be more beautiful than the new life they would soon be blessed with. They were ready to see God in their new child. The day finally came. Pastel had chosen to give birth naturally in their home, in a tub. She was in labor for quite a while, and Greg was starting to become concerned. But the midwife assured them that everything was fine. After many tiring hours, their baby was born. Congratulations, you have a healthy little girl. The couple smiled down at their little miracle, but only for a fleeting moment. The baby's eyes were large and uneven, almost bulging out of her skull. One of her ears was folded over entirely. One of her arms was shorter than the other. "Is she okay?" Pastel asked the midwife. "Oh, yes. She's a very healthy young girl. Despite these minor abnormalities, she will live a long, happy life. Congratulations again. You are so lucky. What are you naming her?" The couple didn't answer. Later that night, neither one of them could sleep. They just sat in bed, their thoughts racing through their minds. Their unnamed baby, however, was sleeping peacefully in her crib. Pastel turned to Greg. "That's not our baby," she said coldly. "I don't see God in that child. I see the devil." Early the next morning, Pastel and Greg decided to visit Mines View Park, thinking it would raise their moods. Pastel carried the baby in her arms as they approached the edge of the cliff and looked out over the valley. The sun was just barely rising. It was still early enough that no one else was at the park. Pastel took a step towards the edge, and another, and let her arms drop. Greg rubbed her back comfortingly. "We'll try again, honey." A month or so later, Pastel became pregnant again. Every day leading up to her due date, they prayed to God that their baby would be born differently than last time. And she was. Pastel gave birth to a healthy baby girl whose features were a seamless blend of her parents. She was perfect to Pastel and Greg in every way. They decided to name her Angela. On Angela's 4th birthday, they took her to their favorite park so they could show her their special place by the cliff, and that way it could be their special place as a family. But when they entered the gate, Angela began to cry.
"I don't like this place,"
she sobbed.
"Can we go home?"
"We just want to show you our favorite place in the world, darling." Pastel tried to comfort her. "It's just right over there. You're going to love it." Angela was putting up a bit of a fight, and her parents were embarrassed by the scene they were causing. But they managed to get Angela to the cliff, and that's when she completely lost it.
"Mommy, no, please don't hurt me, please."
At this point, everyone in the park was staring.
"Please don't throw me over again, please. I'm pretty now. I came back pretty so you'd love me. Don't you love me?"
It was a cool autumn evening in 1956. John, a middle-aged father, was sitting in the living room on his favorite brand new leather chair, reading the newspaper. As he finished a section, he handed it to his 7-year-old daughter sitting on the ground near him, who was cutting out paper dolls. The peace and quiet was interrupted by the doorbell. Who could that be at such a late hour? John wondered. He opened the door to find a handsome young man in a suit, carrying a briefcase and smiling widely. "Good evening. I hate to bother you at such an odd hour," the man said, his voice warm and inviting. "But my car doesn't seem to be in working order, and I was wondering if I could borrow your phone to call for assistance." John scanned the stranger up and down. "And what brings you to our neighborhood?" "Oh, pardon my manners." The stranger handed him a business card that said "Family First" in big letters. "The name's Robert. I sell life insurance." As John inspected the business card, his wife Lauren appeared behind him. "Why don't you come in and out of the cold? You are more than welcome to use our phone, but you have to stay for dinner first, and I won't take no for an answer." She motioned for Robert to come inside while John stared daggers at her. Lauren offered the new leather chair for Robert to sit in while she finished up dinner. Robert commented on how nice the new leather felt. He then proceeded to explain the types of policies he sold and how they're ideal for families. "This world is full of the unexpected," Robert said. "Don't you want your family to be protected in case something happened to you?" John still wasn't comfortable with this man in their house, and before he could even respond to Robert's question, he noticed a shift in Robert's expression. Robert was looking at the newspaper headline that the young girl was cutting up. It read, "Missing insurance salesman still not found," and the rest was cut out. John looked back at Robert, whose once confident posture had devolved into trembling nervousness. "You know, I should probably get out of your hair," Robert said as he stood up to leave. "I'm gonna get going." "What about the phone?" John said bitingly. Just then, Lauren burst through the room to announce that dinner was ready. Robert continued to politely decline, but Lauren sat him down at the dinner table with the rest of the family. Realizing he didn't have much choice, Robert began to dive into the roast placed in front of him. And it was delicious, so tender and juicy, unlike anything he'd ever had. He washed it down with a swig of red wine and gave his compliments to the chef. As he put the drink back down, he saw that the girl was staring at him. Her lips were now turned upright into a mischievous smile. She covered her mouth, suppressing her giggles. Robert wondered what it was that she found so funny. Then, his vision began to blur. His hearing began to fade in and out. He could faintly make out John and Lauren's hushed voices.
"I'm sorry I didn't consult you first, John, but you know how much I love salesmen. The young and ambitious ones are always the tastiest." "It's okay, dear. It worked out anyway. I think he was beginning to catch on to us."
In his state of increasing confusion, Robert made a realization. He realized what happened to the missing salesman in the headline, realized why that leather chair felt so new, realized what it was in his drink, and realized who he had just eaten. Robert wanted to be in the business of helping families from the unexpected. Unfortunately, he wasn't prepared for this family who would be helping themselves to him.
In the early 1900s, the seaside town of Japan was a well-known hub for world travelers. Visitors could find all types of strange and unusual goods in the marketplace. And that is where this particular nightmare began. 17-year-old Ekichi Suzuki was determined to find the perfect Christmas present for his baby sister. Just minutes before his boat was to take him to Hiroshima, he saw it. The most beautiful porcelain doll he ever laid eyes on. In a glass case, standing 20 inches tall, she had shoulder and leg hair that was done up in a traditional okappa style. Her piercing black eyes drew him in. With seconds to spare, the exchange was made and the proud big brother was on his way home with the perfect present. On Christmas Day, Ekichi presented the gift to his 2-year-old sister, Okiku. She was immediately infatuated. It wasn't long before Okiku dismissed all other toys in favor of her doll. She even named the doll Okiku after herself. When her brother asked her why she gave the doll her own name, she replied, Because I am her, and she is me. The two Okikus began to look alike. Their hairstyles and outfits often matched. People would find Okiku speaking to the doll as if the doll was speaking right back to her. But as Okiku got older, her interest began to change. She began to forget her doll. Not all the time, but just often enough that strange things began to happen. There was this one time Okiku went to a friend's house and left her doll at home. When she returned to her house, her bedroom had been ransacked. Another time, Okiku forgot to bring her doll to a sleepover. When she fell asleep, Okiku had terrible nightmares that a doll was following her with a torch. The next morning, Okiku returned home to find a small fire had occurred in her bedroom. Okiku stayed clear of the doll. It wasn't long after that Okiku became sick, contracting what appeared to be yellow fever, a debilitating disease that infected so many people at that time. Luckily, Okiku's doll was right by her side. Being bedbound due to the illness, the two became inseparable again. The house staff couldn't even take the doll out of Okiku's hands to change the bedding. The child and the doll were constantly attached to one another. Whispers began swirling among the household that its black eyes were turning the same emerald green as Okiku's. Its cheeks were flushed like a human's, and one of the servants swore the doll had blinked. But Okiku just held on tighter as each day passed. Then one morning, Ikechi stopped by his sister's room. He opened the door to find her in her bed, eyes wide open and eyes black. Her body was ice cold. He tried to resuscitate her, but it was no use. What stood out was how tightly her doll was holding on to her. It made him feel uneasy, but grateful Okiku didn't die alone. The family was determined to bury the doll with Okiku, but circumstances and governmental oversight prevented this last act of kindness. They needed to find another place for it. The doll sat on the family's altar so they could pay tribute to her. Weeks went by, and they noticed the doll's hair looked like it was growing. Eventually, the doll's hair reached its waist. Then, other strange things began to happen. The lights would flicker, doors slammed, and the doll would randomly move about the house without anyone's aid. At first, this gave them comfort. They believed it was Okiku paying a spiritual visit. But then everyone began having nightmares. The morning after another sleepless night, Okiku's mom took a tumble down the stairs. She survived, but swore she had been pushed by the doll. Now, if she actually was, or if she just blamed the doll for her lack of sleep, it no longer mattered. Either way, the doll needed to go. Ikechi tried to burn the doll at his mother's request, but its resemblance to his sister was too strong. He couldn't harm her. Instead, he went to the shamans. They agreed to take the doll and observe it. There was no denying her hair grew and grew. After trimming it, they sent a lock of the doll's hair to be tested. The results were shocking. The doll was growing human hair. But when Ikechi returned to the shaman, Okiku had vanished. A year later, the seaside town of Sapporo had not seemed to change much. It was still packed with people collecting souvenirs and trinkets, hoping to take a little piece of Japan on their journey. And tucked away in the back of a shop, inside a glass case, stood a beautiful doll. 20 inches tall, with raven black hair. The bell to the door rang, and in walked a father with his young daughter. It only took a moment before her eyes met with the doll, and an exchange was made. Soon, the child was traveling back home with a new companion. She swore the doll had smiled. Her father was pleased because his usually reserved daughter had a new playmate. Thanks so much for listening. Like and share if this video gave you the chills. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell for notifications. See you next time.